I'm Madison, 29, and I nearly choked on my turkey when my sister Stephanie announced to our entire family that she was so excited to move into Maddie's new apartment in January. The dining room fell silent as 20 pairs of eyes shifted between us. I had just closed on my dream condo after years of saving, something my perpetually unemployed sister knew nothing about. What Stephanie didn't realize was that I had already arranged for our cousin Kayla, a domestic violence survivor, to move in. The look on Stephanie's face when I finally spoke still haunts our family photos. If you're sitting there wondering how Christmas dinner turned into a family showdown, stick around. I'd love to know where you're watching from in the comments. This holiday drama was just the beginning of a family battle that changed everything. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to entitled family members, and let me know if you've experienced holiday announcements that left everyone speechless. To understand why Stephanie's announcement hit me like a brick, you need to know the history between us. I've always been the responsible one in our family. After graduating with my teaching degree, I took a position at Westfield Elementary School teaching 4th grade. For 7 long years, I saved every penny I could toward a down payment on my own place. I worked summers at a local bookstore, took on tutoring gigs, and even drove for a food delivery service on weekends. My apartment fund was sacred. Stephanie, on the other hand, is my 5-year-old sister, who has perfected the art of avoiding responsibility. She's dropped out of college 3 times, first nursing, then business, and finally communications. Each time our parents paid the full tuition without question. Her employment history reads like a cautionary tale. She was fired from the mall for consistently showing up late, let go from a restaurant for borrowing from the till, and asked not to return to a daycare after parents complained about her spending the day on her phone instead of watching the children. Our parents, Barbara and Richard, have always enabled her behavior. Stephanie is just finding herself, Mom would say. Not everyone figures things out as quickly as you did, Madison. Dad would silently slide her money whenever she batted her eyelashes. The pattern was established early and never broke. Growing up, Stephanie was always favored. She was prettier, with our grandmother's striking blue eyes and natural blonde curls, while I inherited our father's mousy brown hair and ordinary features. She was outgoing and charming in public, the kind of daughter parents loved to show off at church functions and family reunions. I was quieter, more serious. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" was a common refrain whenever I failed to display enough enthusiasm at social gatherings. But charm doesn't pay the bills, and by 29, I was finally ready for my own place. The apartment search had been exhilarating. After years of renting dingy one-bedrooms with questionable plumbing and neighbors who practiced the drums at 2 a.m., I found a perfect 2-bedroom condo in a secure building with a doorman. It had a small balcony overlooking a community garden, updated appliances, and even a shared playground area that would be perfect for children. Children like Emily and Noah, my cousin Kayla's kids, ages 4 and 2. What my family didn't know was that 3 months earlier, Kayla had called me in the middle of the night from a gas station bathroom. Her husband Derek had come home drunk again, but this time his anger had escalated beyond verbal abuse. She had grabbed the kids and her purse and nothing else. I'd picked them up and put them in a hotel that night, but it was only a temporary solution. During tearful conversations over the following days, I promised Kayla that once I closed on my condo, they would have a safe place to stay. It wasn't charity. We worked out an arrangement where she would contribute what she could toward utilities while getting back on her feet. The 2nd bedroom would be for the kids, and we'd set up a pull-out sofa in the living room for her. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe. Kayla insisted on keeping her situation private from most of the family. Derek had a violent temper, and she feared what might happen if word got back to him about her whereabouts. Only my closest friend Emma knew about the arrangement. Even my parents were in the dark, partly because of Kayla's privacy concerns and partly because I knew how they might react. My family has a history of gossip spreading faster than wildfire. This wasn't the first time Stephanie had made outrageous announcements at Christmas dinner. Last year, she declared she was starting a fashion blog and needed our grandmother's vintage jewelry collection to create content. The year before, She announced she was going to be a professional dog trainer and needed $5,000 for certification courses. She never posted a single blog entry, and the dog training dream died when she realized it involved picking up poop. My therapist, Dr. Warner, had been working with me for months on setting boundaries with my family. "Your needs matter too, Madison," she would remind me during our sessions. "You're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions." It had taken years of therapy to start believing that. This apartment represented more than just a place to live. It was my first real step toward independence from my family's dysfunctional dynamics. I had chosen the furniture, planned the layout, and even splurged on quality kitchenware instead of the mismatched thrift store collection I'd been using. More importantly, it was going to be a sanctuary for Kayla and her children. The two-bedroom condo wasn't luxurious, but it had everything we needed. The building had secure entry, essential for Kayla's safety concerns. The neighborhood was within walking distance of a public library and park. There was even an indoor pool that would be perfect for Emily, who loved swimming. I had specifically chosen a place that was in a different school district than my parents' home, where Derek might look for them. All these plans were set in motion months before Stephanie's Christmas announcement. The closing was scheduled for December 27th, and Kayla planned to move in on January 2nd. I had already taken those days off work to help her get settled. Everything was arranged. What wasn't arranged was my sister inviting herself to live in my new home. Christmas at my parents' house has always been an elaborate affair. Mom spends weeks decorating every inch of their suburban home with twinkling lights, garlands, and enough Santa figurines to open a museum. Dad smokes a turkey in the backyard smoker he uses exactly once a year, and everyone contributes side dishes. This year, I brought my famous sweet potato casserole and a chocolate pecan pie that had taken 3 attempts to get right. The dining room table had been extended to its full length, accommodating not just my immediate family, but also Uncle Frank and Aunt Helen, my mother's brother and his wife, their adult children, Brandon and Jessica, and a few family friends who had nowhere else to go for the holidays. 20 of us squeezed around a table meant for 16, elbows occasionally bumping as we passed serving dishes around. Conversation had been flowing smoothly. Uncle Frank was telling anyone who would listen about his new golf clubs. Aunt Helen was subtly criticizing Mom's choice of table linens, and my cousins were discussing their recent trip to Mexico. I was seated between Brandon and an empty chair that Stephanie had yet to fill, as she was characteristically late. When Stephanie finally arrived, 40 minutes after the scheduled dinner time, she made her entrance like a celebrity, arriving at a premiere. "Sorry, everyone. Traffic was insane," she announced, though we all knew she lived 10 minutes away. She wore a new dress that still had the security tag attached, a mistake she claimed the store made, and carried a bottle of cheap champagne as her contribution. Mom rearranged several place settings to accommodate her at the most convenient spot, displacing Jessica, who took it with a tight smile. Everyone resumed their conversations, and dinner continued. I was in the middle of telling Brandon about my 4th grader's holiday concert when Stephanie clinked her glass with a spoon. "I have an announcement to make," she said, her voice carrying across the table. Conversations died down as all eyes turned to her. Stephanie had a flair for dramatic announcements, so everyone was prepared for entertainment. "As you all know, Maddie has finally bought her own place." She turned to beam at me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. How did she know? I hadn't told anyone in the family yet except my parents, who had promised to keep it quiet until after the holidays. "And I'm so excited to share that I'll be moving in with her in January," Stephanie continued, raising her glass. "To new beginnings and sister roommates?" Several relatives started to offer congratulations before noticing my expression. I genuinely couldn't speak. The bite of turkey in my mouth seemed to expand, and I reached for my water glass with a shaking hand. "Isn't that wonderful?" Mom chimed in quickly, trying to cover the awkward silence. "The girls will be living together again, just like when they were little." "I never agreed to this," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Stephanie rolled her eyes dramatically. "Don't be so serious, Maddie. We talked about this." "No, we absolutely did not," I said more firmly, setting down my fork. "When exactly did we have this conversation, Stephanie?" You know, that time. She waved her hand vaguely. Anyway, it'll be perfect. Your place has 2 bedrooms, and you only need one. Plus, I really need to move out of my apartment since they're raising the rent. I stood up abruptly. Can I talk to you in the kitchen, please? Without waiting for an answer, I walked out of the dining room, aware of the uncomfortable silence I left behind. Stephanie sauntered into the kitchen a minute later, looking annoyed. What is your problem? Why are you making a scene? Making a scene? I hissed, keeping my voice low. You just announced to our entire family that you're moving into my apartment without ever discussing it with me. That's not happening, Stephanie. Why not? You have an extra bedroom. Don't be selfish. It's not about being selfish. I already have plans for that bedroom. What plans? You live alone. I hesitated, not wanting to break Kayla's confidence but needing to make Stephanie understand. I have someone else moving in. The arrangements were made months ago. Stephanie's eyes widened, then narrowed. Who? You don't have any friends. The casual cruelty was so typical that I barely flinched. That's not true, and it's none of your business. The point is, you can't move in. End of discussion. My sister's lower lip began to tremble, a warning sign I recognized from childhood. You've always been so mean to me, she said, voice rising. You've always had everything so easy. A steady job, your own place. Everyone thinks you're so perfect. And you can't even help your sister when she needs it. Mom appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. Girls, what's going on? Everyone can hear you. Madison won't let me move in with her, Stephanie wailed, tears now streaming down her face. I'm going to be homeless, and she doesn't even care. Madison, Mom said in her disappointed tone, surely you can help your sister out. Just for a little while. Dad appeared behind Mom. What's this about Stephanie being homeless? She's not going to be homeless, I said firmly. She has an apartment. She just doesn't want to pay increased rent. But you have that extra bedroom, Dad pointed out. Family helps family. I already have plans for that bedroom, I repeated, frustration mounting as no one seemed to be listening to me. Aunt Helen joined the growing kitchen congregation. What's all this fuss about? The turkey is getting cold. Madison is refusing to help Stephanie, Mom explained, as if I was being unreasonable. Well, that doesn't seem very Christmas-spirited, Aunt Helen said with a sniff. She had always favored Stephanie, slipping her extra gifts and money throughout our childhood. You don't understand, I tried to explain. I made a commitment to someone else. Who could be more important than your sister? Mom asked. Uncle Frank squeezed into the increasingly crowded kitchen. Now, there's always a compromise. Madison, surely Stephanie could stay in the living room for a while, just until she finds her feet? I felt cornered, physically and emotionally. Everyone was looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to give in as I always did. Stephanie had stopped crying and was now watching me with a smug expression, confident in her victory. Something in me snapped. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I will not have Stephanie living in my home, not in the bedroom, not in the living room, not in a closet. I bought this place with my own money after saving for 7 years. I get to decide who lives there. A stunned silence followed. I had never spoken to my family like this before. Madison Catherine Williams, Mom gasped. I did not raise you to be so selfish. Actually, you raised me to be a doormat, I replied, surprised by my own boldness. You raised me to always give in to Stephanie's demands, to always be the responsible one while letting her do whatever she wants. Not this time. Stephanie burst into fresh tears. See how mean she is to me? She's always been jealous because everyone likes me better. That's enough, Dad said firmly. Madison, apologize to your sister. No, I said again, that new powerful word that felt foreign on my tongue. I'm going home now. Merry Christmas, everyone. I grabbed my coat from the hall closet and left, ignoring the calls of my name behind me. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see them all gathered in the front window, watching me leave Christmas dinner early for the first time in my life. It should have felt terrible. Instead, I felt like I could finally breathe. The drive home gave me time to reflect on the patterns that had led to this Christmas disaster. Stephanie's sense of entitlement didn't develop overnight. It was cultivated through years of our family's dysfunctional dynamics. When we were children, Stephanie regularly took my possessions without asking. My favorite teddy bear disappeared for weeks, only to reappear in her toy box with a missing eye. The jewelry box I received for my 10th birthday somehow migrated to her room within days. When I complained to our parents, the response was always the same. Don't be selfish, Madison. Sisters share. By the time we reached our teen years, the pattern was firmly established. I was forced to include Stephanie in my activities regardless of whether it was appropriate. My 16th birthday party had to accommodate 14-year-old Stephanie and her friends, turning what should have been a movie night with my classmates into a chaotic slumber party dominated by her demands. My first date had to include Stephanie tagging along just this once because she was having a hard day. College should have provided some separation, but Stephanie found ways to insert herself into my life even then. During my sophomore year, she visited unexpectedly during finals week, claiming she needed space from high school drama. I gave up my bed and slept on the floor of my own dorm room for 5 days while trying to study for exams. She left lipstick stains on my mugs, used all my clean towels, and borrowed $60 for emergencies that looked suspiciously like new nail polish and takeout food. The money was never repaid, just like the hundreds of dollars that followed over the years. $20 here, $50 there, accumulating into a debt that we all pretended didn't exist. It's just money, Mom would say when I mentioned it. You have a steady job. Stephanie is still finding her way. Perhaps the most telling incident was the 3 months Stephanie lived with me after her second college dropout. She had nowhere to go, she claimed, though our parents' house had a perfectly good guest room. I reluctantly agreed to a 2-week stay that stretched into a quarter of a year. During that time, she broke my microwave, stained my couch with self-tanner, and regularly borrowed my work clothes without asking, returning them wrinkled or dirty, if at all. The apartment smelled perpetually of stale smoke, though smoking wasn't allowed in the building. Empty wine bottles filled the recycling bin, though she never contributed to groceries or utilities. When I finally asked her to leave after coming home to find strangers partying in my living room, she accused me of being uptight and jealous of her social life. My parents made excuses for her behavior, as always. She's young, they said. She's just having fun. The fact that I had been financially independent since graduation, while Stephanie continued to drain their resources, seemed irrelevant. Any attempt to address these issues labeled me as the villain. I was mean for not wanting to lend Stephanie my car. I was selfish for not co-signing her lease after she was evicted for non-payment. I was cold for suggesting she apply for entry-level positions instead of holding out for her dream job with no qualifications. The pattern affected every aspect of my life. I became hesitant to form close friendships, worried that people would take advantage of me like my family did. I worked extra hours to rebuild savings after Stephanie emergencies depleted them. I dated cautiously, hyper-aware of any signs that a partner might be using me. The car incident was perhaps the most egregious example of Stephanie's entitlement. 2 years ago, she borrowed my car without permission while I was at work, claiming her car wouldn't start. Instead of driving to a job interview as she claimed, she took a joyride with friends to a beach 3 hours away. On the return trip, distracted by taking selfies, she rear-ended another vehicle. No one was seriously hurt, but my car was totaled. Stephanie had the audacity to be angry that my insurance didn't immediately provide her with a rental car. "How am I supposed to get around now?" she demanded, as if she was the victim. She never apologized, never offered to help with the deductible, and complained about having to give a statement to the insurance company because it was so boring. It was after the car incident that I finally started therapy. My friend Emma had been gently suggesting it for years, concerned about the toll my family dynamics were taking on my mental health. "This isn't normal, Madison," she would say after witnessing particularly manipulative interactions with my sister or parents. "You deserve better treatment." Dr. Warner helped me recognize the toxic patterns I'd been conditioned to accept. "Your family has trained you to be the giver," she explained during one session, "and they've trained Stephanie to be the taker. But you can begin to change that dynamic by setting boundaries." Boundaries. The word felt revolutionary. The concept that I could say no without being a bad person was foreign but liberating. My friends Emma and Tyler became crucial allies in this journey. Unlike my family, they celebrated my achievements without expecting anything in return. They validated my feelings when I described frustrating interactions with Stephanie. That would drive me insane, Tyler said once, after I told him about Stephanie showing up at my workplace to demand money for a rideshare home. How do you stay so calm? The truth was, I wasn't calm inside. I was a volcano of resentment, building pressure with each entitled demand, each parental excuse, each sacrifice I was expected to make for family peace. Therapy was teaching me that this pressure needed healthy outlets before a catastrophic eruption. The Christmas dinner announcement was the final straw. Stephanie assumed, as she always had, that her needs would automatically supersede any plans or preferences I might have. She didn't ask, she announced. She didn't consider that I might have other arrangements. She simply declared her intention to move in. What she couldn't have known was that I had finally reached my limit. Doctor. Warner's voice was in my head as the family pressured me in that kitchen. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. For once, I would prioritize my commitment to Kayla over my family's expectations. As I arrived back at my apartment that Christmas night, I felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. Standing up to my family had been terrifying, but it was also the first step toward breaking a lifetime of unhealthy patterns. Whatever came next would be difficult, but at least I was finally being honest with them and with myself. I've been your doormat for the last time, Stephanie, I thought as I unlocked my door. This ends now. The relationship between Kayla and me had always been more like sisters than cousins, despite not seeing each other frequently throughout adulthood. We had been close as children, spending summers together at our grandparents' lake house, building sandcastles and catching fireflies. As we grew older, our paths diverged. I went to college and established my teaching career, while Kayla married her high school boyfriend Derek shortly after graduation. I didn't see the warning signs at first. Derek was charming in public, always complimenting Kayla and seeming attentive. But looking back, there were red flags. The way he checked her phone when she wasn't looking, how he criticized her outfits, his subtle put-downs disguised as jokes. "Isn't my wife adorable when she's clueless about sports?" he'd say, wrapping an arm around her that looked affectionate but gripped too tightly. At a family reunion 3 years ago, I noticed bruises on Kayla's wrist. She laughed it off, claiming she'd bumped into a door, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I slipped her my phone number, saying, "If you ever need anything, call me, anytime." She nodded almost imperceptibly. For nearly 2 years, that offer went unclaimed. Then, at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, my phone rang. I answered to the sound of muffled sobbing. "Madison?" Kayla's voice was barely audible. "I need help." She was calling from a gas station bathroom 20 miles outside our hometown, with 4-year-old Emily and 2-year-old Noah asleep in her car. Derek had come home, drunk and furious about dinner not being ready. When he raised his hand to Kayla, she had grabbed the children and her purse and fled. "I didn't know who else to call," she whispered. "My parents would just tell me to go back and work things out." I drove to the gas station immediately, finding her huddled in her car, the children asleep in car seats. Noah had a teddy bear clutched in his tiny fist. Emily had tear streaks on her cheeks. Kayla herself had a swelling bruise forming beneath her eye. "Let's get you somewhere safe," I said, helping her move the sleeping children to my car. That night, I checked them into a hotel using my credit card and stayed with them, listening as Kayla finally shared the full extent of the abuse she'd endured for years. The physical violence had been escalating, but the emotional and financial abuse had been constant throughout their relationship. Derek controlled every dollar, checked her receipts, required her to ask permission to buy necessities. He had isolated her from friends, monitored her phone, and convinced her that she was incompetent and worthless. "No one else would ever want you," he told her regularly. "You're lucky I put up with you." Over the following days, I helped Kayla file a police report and obtain an emergency protection order. I connected her with a domestic violence support group and accompanied her to her first meeting. but the question of where she and the children would live long-term remained unanswered. "I can't go back to him," she said, rocking Noah as he slept in her arms. "But I have no money, no job, nowhere to go." That's when I made the promise. "When I close on my condo next month, you'll have a place to stay. You and the kids can have the second bedroom. It's not huge, but it's safe. No one will hurt you there." Kayla protested at first, not wanting to burden me. We worked out an arrangement that preserved her dignity. She would contribute what she could to utilities, help with cooking and cleaning, and save money for her own place. It wasn't charity, it was family helping family, in the way my parents always claimed to value but seldom practice. The search for my condo became even more purposeful after that promise. I looked specifically for secure buildings and neighborhoods far from Derek's usual haunts. I prioritized properties with good schools for Emily and amenities that would make the transition easier for the children. The playground and pool in my chosen building weren't just nice features, they were healing spaces for traumatized kids. I consulted with Amanda, a lawyer friend of Emma's, about the legal implications of having Kayla and the children live with me. Amanda helped Kayla understand her rights and the process of divorce, child custody, and support. She even connected Kayla with resources for job training programs, specifically designed for survivors of domestic violence. Safety was our primary concern. Derek had made threats when Kayla left, promising to find her and make her sorry. We established security protocols, no social media posts about her whereabouts, no telling extended family where she was living, and regular check-ins when she was out alone. The doorman and security features of my new building weren't luxury amenities, they were necessary protections. Kayla began therapy, both individual sessions and a support group for survivors. I sometimes watched the children during these appointments, getting to know Emily's love for drawing and Noah's fascination with toy trucks. Emily was old enough to understand something bad had happened, asking heartbreaking questions like, "Is Daddy still mad at us? And did I make Daddy hit Mommy?" The therapist recommended consistency and routines to help the children feel secure again. If you're still with me at this halfway point in my story, I want to thank you. Sharing Kayla's experience helps raise awareness about domestic violence and the importance of having support systems. If you or someone you know is in a situation like Kayla's, please know there are resources available. I'll include some links in the description. Now, let's continue with what happened after I left Christmas dinner early. My own experience with an abusive relationship in college, though brief and less severe, helped me understand some of what Kayla was going through. I remembered the confusion, the self-doubt, the way manipulation distorts your perception of reality. My ex-boyfriend never hit me, but his jealous accusations, isolation tactics, and emotional manipulation left scars that took years to heal. Kayla and I attended a support group together where we both found healing. The group was facilitated by a counselor named Diane who specialized in trauma recovery. The other women in the group ranged in age from 19 to 73, proving that abuse doesn't discriminate by age, education, or economic status. Hearing their stories of survival gave Kayla hope that she could rebuild her life. In the weeks leading up to my closing date, Kayla secured a part-time job at a bookstore with flexible hours that accommodated her childcare needs. Emily was enrolled in a preschool program with a scholarship for families in transition. Noah attended a subsidized daycare 2 days a week, giving Kayla time to work and attend therapy. Small steps toward independence that filled me with pride for my cousin's resilience. My promise to Kayla wasn't just about providing shelter. It was about creating a safe space where she and her children could heal and rebuild. I purchased bunk beds for the children and colorful bedding with dinosaurs for Noah and butterflies for Emily. I found child-safe furniture and set aside storage space for their toys. I wanted them to feel at home, not like temporary guests. This was why Stephanie's casual announcement that she was moving in felt like such a violation. She wasn't just inviting herself into my space. She was threatening the sanctuary I had promised to a family in crisis. Her entitlement wasn't just annoying this time, it was potentially dangerous. If Stephanie moved in, she would inevitably tell other family members about Kayla's whereabouts. Her social media addiction would put Kayla at risk if she posted photos of their fun roommate life. Her irresponsibility could jeopardize the children's safety if she left doors unlocked or brought strangers home, and her self-centered nature would create additional stress for a woman already struggling to recover from trauma. I couldn't explain all this at the Christmas dinner table. Kayla's situation wasn't mine to share publicly, especially when Derek still had connections to some extended family members. My silence made me appear selfish and unreasonable to my family, but protecting Kayla's privacy and safety was worth their disapproval. As I prepared for the closing date and the move, I kept reminding myself of what really mattered. Not my family's approval, not keeping the peace, not even my own comfort, but the promise I had made to a woman who had trusted me with her life and her children's futures. "You're doing the right thing," Emma reassured me during a phone call the day after Christmas. "Your family will eventually understand." I wasn't so sure about that. But for the first time in my life, their understanding wasn't my priority. The aftermath of my Christmas exit was immediate and overwhelming. I had barely arrived home when my phone began buzzing with texts and calls. Mom sent 17 messages in rapid succession, ranging from, "How could you embarrass us like this?" to, "Stephanie is crying in the bathroom," to, "You've ruined Christmas for everyone." Dad's approach was more direct. He called 4 times before leaving a voicemail. "Madison, this behavior is unacceptable. Call your mother and apologize." His tone was the same one he used when I was 10 and refused to share my new bike with Stephanie. I silenced my phone and spent the evening watching holiday movies alone, a strange but peaceful experience after years of chaotic family celebrations. By morning, my inbox had accumulated 43 messages from various family members, most expressing shock at my selfish behavior and cruel treatment of my sister. Even relatives who hadn't witnessed the confrontation had opinions. Cousin Jessica texted, "Heard about the Christmas drama. Classic Stephanie, but did you have to leave?" Grandma was upset. Uncle Frank sent a lengthy message about family unity and Christmas spirit, concluding with, "We all need to make sacrifices sometimes." I was drafting measured responses to the more reasonable messages when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway, their expressions grim. I considered not answering, but years of conditioning made my hand turn the knob automatically. "We need to talk about your behavior," Mom said, as she brushed past me into the apartment. Dad followed, nodding solemnly. "My behavior?" I echoed, closing the door. "You mean setting a boundary about my own home?" "Don't use that therapy talk," Mom snapped. "This isn't about boundaries. This is about you refusing to help your sister when she needs you." "Stephanie doesn't need me," I said calmly. "She wants to use me, as usual. There's a difference. She's going through a rough patch," Dad explained, as if I hadn't heard this justification countless times before. "Her landlord is raising the rent, and she can't afford it on her current salary." "What salary?" I asked. "Last I heard, she quit her job at the coffee shop because her manager was mean to her." "She has a new job," Mom said vaguely. "In social media." "That's not a job," I pointed out. "That's her posting Instagram photos of other people's food and tagging restaurants hoping for free meals." "You've always been jealous of her creativity," Mom said dismissively. "The point is, she needs somewhere to stay, and you have room. That's what family does." "I've already committed that room to someone else," I repeated. "Who? That mysterious roommate you mentioned?" Dad asked. "Who is more important than your own sister?" I hesitated, still reluctant to betray Kayla's confidence. "Someone who genuinely needs help, not just wants a free ride." Mom's eyes narrowed. "You're making that up to avoid helping Stephanie. There is no roommate, is there?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Thanks for ruining my Christmas, bitch. Mom says you're lying about having a roommate. I'm telling everyone what a selfish liar you are." Attached was a screenshot of a social media post she'd already made, claiming I had abandoned the family on Christmas and was making up excuses to avoid helping my homeless sister. I showed my parents the text. "This is who you're defending. This is who you think should live with me." Dad at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mom just sighed. "She's upset. You know how emotional she gets." "I'm done," I said quietly. I need you to leave now. Madison Catherine Williams, we are not finished discussing this, Mom began. Yes, we are, I said, opening the door. I'm an adult with my own home, making my own decisions. You don't have to agree with them, but you do have to respect them. They left reluctantly, Mom promising this wasn't the end of the conversation. I locked the door behind them, hands shaking slightly, and then did something I'd never done before. I temporarily blocked both their numbers on my phone. Over the next few days, Stephanie escalated her social media campaign against me. Posts appeared claiming I had always been the favorite and never had to struggle like she did. She shared childhood photos with captions implying I had been cruel to her growing up. Friends and distant relatives commented with heart emojis and stay strong messages, having no idea of the actual situation. When I finally checked my email, I found a message from Aunt Helen to several family members, with me accidentally included, speculating that I might be having some kind of breakdown or under the influence of some cult-like therapy group. She suggested a family intervention might be necessary. The stress began affecting my work. I returned to school for teacher preparation days, feeling exhausted and distracted. My colleague Nancy noticed and asked if everything was all right. Family drama? I explained vaguely. Nothing new. Family has a way of pushing our buttons because they installed them, Nancy said wisely. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Emma and Tyler became my buffer against the onslaught of family pressure. They took turns checking in on me, brought over dinner when I was too drained to cook, and provided objective perspectives when I started to question whether I was, in fact, being unreasonable. If Stephanie showed up at my door expecting to move in without asking, I'd lose my mind, Tyler assured me. You're not the crazy one here. Emma was more direct. Your family is trying to make you responsible for Stephanie's life choices. Again, you're right to say no. Dr. Warner squeezed me in for an emergency session when the anxiety became overwhelming. What you're experiencing is the extinction burst, she explained. When people are used to getting their way with certain behaviors, those behaviors often intensify before they stop. Your family is escalating because your new boundaries threaten the established dynamic. It feels like I'm fighting everyone, I admitted. Not everyone, Dr. Warner corrected. Just the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Notice who's supporting your growth. She was right. While my immediate family and some extended relatives were pressuring me to give in, others were emerging as unexpected allies. Cousin Jessica called to apologize for her initial text. I've been thinking about it, and you're right to stand your ground. Stephanie has been pulling this stuff forever. The biggest surprise came from cousin Brandon, who had witnessed the Christmas confrontation firsthand. He sent a private message. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this right. Stephanie's been getting away with this behavior too long. Someone had to say no, eventually. Even as external support helped, the internal conflict was draining. Years of conditioning had taught me that family harmony was my responsibility, that keeping the peace meant giving Stephanie whatever she wanted. Breaking that pattern felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. The closing date for my condo approached, adding practical stress to the emotional turmoil. I had to coordinate movers, transfer utilities, and prepare for Kayla and the children while managing a family crisis and returning to work after the holiday break. Sleep became elusive, and my appetite diminished. Through it all, I held on to one certainty. I had made a promise to Kayla, and I would keep it. Her safety and the well-being of her children outweighed my family's disapproval. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was prioritizing what I knew was right over what would be easier. 1 week after Christmas, I changed my social media settings to private and posted my own statement, taking some time away from family drama to focus on positive changes in my life. I've muted notifications and will respond to messages when I'm ready. It was a small act of self-protection, but it felt significant. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was my grandmother Ruth, who rarely used her cell phone. Madison, this is Grandma. I heard about the Christmas situation. Call me when you can. Just me, not the rest of them. It was the first message that didn't feel like an attack or a demand. As I dialed her number, I wondered if perhaps the family tide was beginning to turn. New Year's Eve has never been my favorite holiday, but this year I approached it with particular dread. My parents were hosting their annual party, an event I had never missed. After a week of limited contact, Mom called from an unfamiliar number to circumvent my blocks. "We expect you at the party," she said without preamble. "The family needs to move past this nonsense." I considered refusing, but realized this confrontation was inevitable. "I'll be there," I said. "But I'm not changing my mind about the apartment." "We'll discuss it tomorrow," she said, clearly believing the family gathering would pressure me into compliance as it had so many times before. Before the party, I met with Dr. Warner for an emergency session to prepare for the difficult conversations ahead. "Remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation," she advised. "Your decision is valid regardless of whether they understand your reasons. Focus on clear, calm statements of fact rather than defensive justifications." We practiced responses to potential pressure tactics and guilt trips. The rehearsal helped, but my stomach still churned with anxiety as I parked outside my parents' home that evening. The house blazed with lights, and I could hear music and laughter from the driveway. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, I am an adult making responsible choices. I have nothing to be ashamed of. Inside, the party was in full swing. Neighbors, friends, and family filled the living room and kitchen. Several people greeted me warmly, unaware of the family drama. I made my way through the crowd, accepting a glass of sparkling cider from Dad, who seemed relieved that I had shown up. "Your mother's in the kitchen," he said, an unspoken instruction to make peace with her. Mom was arranging appetizers on a platter, her movements precise and controlled. "You're late," she said without looking up. "I'm exactly on time," I corrected gently. "Happy New Year, Mom." She glanced up briefly, her expression softening slightly. "There's food in the dining room. Stephanie's already here, so be nice." I found Stephanie holding court in the living room, regaling a group of family friends with an elaborate story about a celebrity she claimed to have met at a coffee shop. She faltered slightly when she saw me, but quickly recovered her composure. "Madison, come join us. I was just telling everyone about my moving plans." The casual way she referenced her moving plans, as if our Christmas confrontation had never happened, stunned me momentarily. She was still operating under the assumption that she would be moving into my condo, despite my explicit refusal. "Actually, Stephanie, could I talk to you privately for a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She rolled her eyes dramatically but followed me to the relatively quiet den. I closed the door partway, wanting privacy but not complete isolation. "I want to be absolutely clear," I began. "You are not moving into my condo. I already have arrangements for the second bedroom, and they cannot be changed." Stephanie's friendly facade dropped immediately. "Why are you being such a bitch about this? It's just a stupid bedroom." "It's not just about the bedroom," I explained. "It's about respect. You announced a major life decision involving me without ever consulting me. That's not okay." "God, you're so uptight," she scoffed. "This is why you don't have friends. Everything has to be planned and perfect for Princess Madison." I refused to take the bait. "My decision is final. I'm telling you this now so you can make other arrangements." "What arrangements? Move back home with Mom and Dad? Get a crappy studio I can't afford? Live in my car?" "Those all sound like options you should consider," I said calmly. "But moving into my home is not one of them." "What's so special about this mysterious roommate anyway?" Stephanie demanded, her voice rising. "Who is it? Some teacher friend? Your secret lesbian lover? What?" I hesitated, still reluctant to share Kayla's situation without permission. "It's someone who needs the space more than you do." "Bullshit," Stephanie shouted, loud enough that heads turned in the living room. "You're making this up to be cruel to me. You've always been jealous because everyone loves me more than you." The door opened fully as Mom hurried in, followed by Dad and several curious relatives. "What is going on in here? People can hear you across the house." "Madison is lying about having a roommate just to keep me homeless," Stephanie cried, tears starting on cue. "She hates me and wants me to suffer." "For the last time, you are not homeless," I said, my patience wearing thin. "You have an apartment. You just don't want to pay increased rent." "I can't afford it," Stephanie wailed. "Not everyone has a cushy teacher's salary." "Then get a job that pays better than part-time barista," I suggested. "Or ask mom and dad for money like you always do. Or find a cheaper apartment. Or get an actual roommate who agrees to live with you. There are many solutions that don't involve taking over my home." "Why can't you just help your sister?" Mom demanded. "Who is this mystery roommate that's more important than family?" The room was now crowded with relatives, watching the drama unfold. Uncle Frank, Aunt Helen, cousins, and even some family friends had gathered to witness the confrontation. The pressure of all those eyes, all those expectations, felt suffocating. In that moment, a calm voice spoke from the doorway. "I think Madison is being very reasonable, actually." Everyone turned to see Grandmother Ruth, who rarely intervened in family disputes. At 82, she was the family matriarch, respected and somewhat feared by all. She made her way slowly into the room, using her cane more for emphasis than support. "Madison," she said, "who is moving into your spare bedroom?" I met her eyes, seeing something there that gave me courage. "It's Kayla and her children," I admitted. "They needed a safe place after leaving her abusive husband." A murmur ran through the gathered family members. Stephanie's mouth opened and closed without sound. "Kayla?" Mom repeated. "Your cousin Kayla? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because she asked for privacy," I explained. "She's afraid of Derek finding out where she is. The fewer people who know her whereabouts, the safer she and the children will be." "Well, why didn't you just say so?" Dad asked, as if the solution was that simple all along. "Because it wasn't my story to tell," I said firmly. "And because Kayla's situation shouldn't have to be the reason my no is respected. No is a complete sentence." "But Kayla could stay with her parents," Stephanie suggested, clearly unwilling to surrender her plans. "She doesn't need your apartment. I do." Grandmother Ruth's voice cut through the room like steel. "Stephanie, that's enough." Everyone fell silent. Grandmother Ruth rarely raised her voice, making it all the more impactful when she did. "Madison is right," she continued. "Kayla needs to be somewhere safe, away from family connections that might lead her husband to her. A shelter would be temporary at best, and no place for children if there's an alternative." "How would you know?" Aunt Helen asked, immediately regretting her tone when Grandmother Ruth fixed her with a stern gaze. "Because I lived it," Grandmother Ruth said quietly. The room fell completely silent. No one moved or spoke as she continued. "Before I met your grandfather, I was married to another man. His name was James, and to the outside world, he was charming and successful. Behind closed doors, he was a monster. He broke my arm twice, cracked 3 ribs, and once knocked me unconscious when I was 7 months pregnant." I stared at my grandmother in shock. In all my 29 years, I had never heard this story. Based on the expressions around me, neither had anyone else. "I lost that baby," she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "And when I finally found the courage to leave, my own family told me to go back to him because divorce was a sin. My sister Margaret, your great-aunt, was the only one who helped me. She gave me a place to stay, kept my whereabouts secret, and helped me start over. Without her, I might not have survived." She turned to face Stephanie directly. "So you will not move into Madison's apartment. You will not put Kayla and her children at risk because of your entitlement. And you will stop this manipulative behavior immediately." Stephanie looked stunned. Her usual tactics rendered powerless in the face of Grandmother Ruth's revelation. Mom was quietly crying, and Dad looked pale. "I had no idea," Mom whispered. "There was no need for you to know," Grandmother Ruth said simply. "But there is need now. Kayla deserves the same chance I had, and Madison is right to provide it." The atmosphere in the room had transformed. What had begun as another episode of family pressuring me to accommodate Stephanie had become a moment of profound revelation and perspective. Uncle Frank cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I apologize for suggesting that compromise earlier, Madison. I didn't understand the situation." Aunt Helen remained silent, her earlier accusations about my mental state notably absent now. Stephanie, unused to not being the center of sympathy, tried one last approach. "But where am I supposed to go?" she asked plaintively. "That," Grandmother Ruth said firmly, is a problem you will need to solve yourself, without displacing a woman and 2 children fleeing violence. As the gathering dispersed, some family members approached me privately to offer support or apologize for their earlier assumptions. The conversation had shifted permanently, not just about my apartment, but about the family dynamic itself. Stephanie stormed out before midnight, unable to handle not being the victim in the narrative. Mom looked shaken but thoughtful, and Dad seemed to be processing decades of family history he had never known. As the countdown to midnight began, Grandmother Ruth took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Your great-aunt Margaret would be proud of you," she said. "As am I." For the first time since the Christmas dinner disaster, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation I had dreaded had become an unexpected turning point, not just for me, but for our entire family. January 2nd arrived, crisp and clear, a perfect day for new beginnings. The closing on my condo had gone smoothly 5 days earlier, and I had spent the weekend painting the second bedroom a cheerful yellow and assembling the bunk beds. The kitchen cabinets were stocked with child-friendly dishes, and I had installed safety locks on the lower cabinets. Everything was ready for Kayla and the children to arrive that afternoon. I had taken the day off work to oversee the final preparations. The moving company had delivered my furniture the previous day, and I was putting the finishing touches on the children's room, arranging stuffed animals on the beds, and hanging colorful curtains when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a sight that made my stomach drop. Stephanie, standing in the hallway with what appeared to be several suitcases. For a moment, I considered not answering. But my condo was on the 3rd floor of a secure building. She must have either convinced the doorman to let her in or followed another resident through the front door. Either way, ignoring her wouldn't make her leave. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "Stephanie, what are you doing here?" She smiled brightly, as if our New Year's Eve confrontation had never happened. "Moving day. I brought my essentials for now. The rest can come later." "We've been through this," I said firmly. "You're not moving in. How did you even get my address?" "Mom told me," she said casually. "Don't worry. I didn't bring much. Just clothes, makeup, my air fryer, and I'll need the master bedroom since I have more stuff. You can take the smaller one." The audacity was breathtaking. "No, Stephanie. You need to leave. Now." Her smile faltered slightly. "Don't be ridiculous, Maddie. I already told everyone I'm moving in today. I posted about it on Instagram." "That doesn't make it true," I pointed out. "Kayla and her children are moving in today. We've been over this multiple times." "About that," Stephanie said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I ran into Derek at the grocery store yesterday. He seemed really worried about Kayla and the kids. I almost told him about your place, but I thought I should talk to you first." Ice ran through my veins. "You did what?" "I didn't tell him anything yet." She emphasized the yet slightly. "But he's really upset, Madison. He says there's been a huge misunderstanding." "Are you actually threatening to tell an abuser where to find his victims?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Not threatening," Stephanie protested, looking wounded. "Just saying that there are 2 sides to every story. And if I'm living here too, I can help keep an eye on things, make sure everyone's okay." A door opened across the hallway, and my neighbor Laura stepped out. She was the building manager, a former social worker in her 60s who had been incredibly helpful during my moving process. "Everything okay out here, Madison?" she asked, eyeing Stephanie's luggage. "My sister was just leaving," I said firmly. "She showed up unannounced and uninvited." "I live here now," Stephanie countered. "My sister is letting me move in." Laura looked between us, quickly assessing the situation. "Is that true, Madison?" "Absolutely not," I stated clearly. "My cousin and her children are moving in today after escaping a domestic violence situation. My sister is not, and has never been invited to live here." Laura's expression hardened as she turned to Stephanie. "Miss, you need to leave the premises immediately. This is a secure building, and uninvited guests are not permitted." "I'm not a guest. I'm family," Stephanie insisted, her voice rising. "Madison is just being selfish. She has all this space, and she won't help her own sister." "That's her prerogative," Laura said calmly. "Now, you can leave voluntarily, or I can call security to escort you out. Your choice. Stephanie's face contorted with rage. You can't do this. I'll call Mom and Dad. They'll tell you I'm supposed to be here. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my mother. Madison, she said when I answered, sounding agitated. Stephanie just texted that you're having her removed from the building? What's going on? She showed up unannounced with suitcases, claiming she lives here, I explained, stepping back into my apartment for privacy. And she implied she would tell Derek where to find Kayla if I don't let her move in. She what? Mom's voice sharpened. Put her on the phone. I stepped back into the hallway where Stephanie was still arguing with Laura. Mom wants to talk to you, I said, holding out the phone. Stephanie took it confidently, clearly expecting parental backup. Mom, Madison is being completely unreasonable. I couldn't hear Mom's side of the conversation, but Stephanie's expression shifted from righteous indignation to defensive anger. But I need a place to stay, she protested. Then, after a pause, that's not fair. She has plenty of room. Another pause. Fine. But don't expect me to babysit her little charity case. She thrust the phone back at me and glared. This isn't over. Actually, it is, I said, taking my phone. Laura, would you mind calling security? I think my sister needs help with her luggage. Laura nodded and pulled out her phone. Stephanie's eyes widened as the reality of the situation sank in. You're choosing some distant cousin over your own sister, she hissed. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not setting boundaries years ago, I replied. Within minutes, 2 security officers arrived. They were polite but firm as they helped Stephanie gather her luggage and escorted her to the lobby. I watched from the hallway, still shaken by her casual threat regarding Derek. My phone rang again. It was Dad this time. Your mother told me what happened, he said without preamble. Is it true Stephanie threatened to tell Derek where Kayla is staying? Yes, I confirmed. She tried to use it as leverage to move in. He was quiet for a moment. I had no idea she would go that far. His voice sounded older, tired. Your mother and we've made mistakes with Stephanie, enabling her, making excuses. It was perhaps the first time I'd ever heard my father acknowledge this reality. We never should have given her your address, he continued. I'm sorry, Madison. I don't know what we thought. I need to know that you won't share information about my home with Stephanie again, I said firmly. Kayla and her children's safety depends on it. You have my word, he promised. And Madison, I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right, even when we made it difficult. The conversation left me feeling both validated and exhausted. I checked the time Kayla would be arriving soon. I needed to pull myself together and ensure the apartment was ready for them, especially after the confrontation with Stephanie. I called Kayla to check on her progress and warned her about the incident with Stephanie. Do you think I should be worried? She asked, her voice tense. I don't think so, I assured her. The building has good security, and Stephanie doesn't actually know about your arrival time. Plus, I'm having a security system installed tomorrow with cameras at the door. This had been planned for weeks, but now seemed even more necessary. Thank you for warning Derek off, Kayla said. You're the only person who's ever really stood up for me. That's changing, I told her. My grandmother shared her own domestic violence experience with the whole family on New Year's. People are beginning to understand better. By the time Kayla arrived with Emily and Noah, I had recovered my composure and was ready to welcome them properly. Emily clutched a worn stuffed rabbit as she timidly explored the apartment. Noah, too young to fully comprehend the situation, was simply excited by the bunk beds and the toy box I had filled with age-appropriate toys. This is really happening, Kayla said quietly, as we unpacked the few possessions they had brought. Most of their belongings had been left behind in their hasty escape. We're really safe here. Yes, I promised her. You are. That evening, as I helped Emily arrange her stuffed animals on her bed and showed Noah how the nightlight projected stars onto the ceiling, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was why I had stood firm against family pressure. This was why I had endured accusations of selfishness and cruelty. for the look of wonder on Emily's face as she claimed her very own bed, for the giggle from Noah as he discovered the toy cars I had hidden in the toy box, for Kayla's tears of relief as she unpacked her few belongings into a space where no one would hurt her. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer friend Amanda. Restraining order paperwork filed. Court date next week. Stephanie won't be able to legally come near your building. Another layer of protection in place. I had contacted Amanda immediately after Stephanie's threat about Derek, explaining the situation and asking about legal options. She had advised a restraining order given the nature of the threat and Stephanie's pattern of boundary violations. Later that night, after Kayla and the children were settled in their room, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. My phone showed several missed calls from Stephanie and one text. "You'll be sorry when you realize what a mistake you've made." I blocked her number without responding and took a deep breath of the crisp January air. For the first time in my life, I had stood firm against the tsunami of family expectations and manipulation. I had kept my promise to someone who truly needed help, even when it would have been easier to give in. The apartment around me wasn't just a property investment. It was tangible proof that I could trust myself to do the right thing, even when everyone was pushing me to do otherwise. As I prepared for bed that first night in my new home, I heard Emily's quiet voice through the wall, asking Kayla to check under the bed for monsters. "There are no monsters here," Kayla assured her. "This is a safe place." And despite the drama of the day, despite Stephanie's threats and my family's complicated reactions, that simple truth remained. This was a safe place. I had made it so, by finally standing firm in my own authority. 6 months passed more quickly than I could have imagined. Spring bloomed into summer, bringing not just warmer weather but profound changes to everyone involved in the Christmas dinner confrontation. Kayla thrived in her new environment. By March, she had secured a full-time position as an administrative assistant at a local law firm specializing in family cases. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Maybe someday I'll be helping other women navigate the legal system," she told me one evening as we prepared dinner together. Her confidence grew daily, visible in small ways. She stood straighter, spoke more assertively, no longer flinched at loud noises. The children blossomed too. Emily started kindergarten and quickly became known for her artistic abilities. Her therapist noted remarkable progress in her emotional regulation and sleep patterns. Noah, now approaching 3, chattered constantly and had overcome his earlier fearfulness around male figures. Watching them play in the building's enclosed playground without constantly checking their surroundings for danger was perhaps the most rewarding part of our living arrangement. Our apartment had transformed from a new, somewhat sterile space into a real home. Children's artwork decorated the refrigerator. Family photos, selective ones, featuring people who truly acted like family, lined the hallway. We established routines and traditions. Pizza Fridays, Sunday morning pancakes, bedtime stories with silly voices. The space felt lived in and loved, exactly as a home should. My boundaries with my own family strengthened and clarified. After the restraining order was granted against Stephanie, a process that horrified my parents, but which I pursued without apology, our relationship underwent necessary changes. I insisted on meeting them at neutral locations rather than their home, where Stephanie might appear unexpectedly. Our conversations were shorter but more genuine, focusing on real connection rather than family drama. Stephanie herself hit what appeared to be rock bottom after losing family support for her behavior. The restraining order prevented her from coming to my building, and her social media campaign against me backfired when several mutual acquaintances blocked her for the constant negativity. Unable to afford her apartment alone, she eventually moved back in with our parents temporarily, a situation that proved educational for all involved. For perhaps the first time, my parents enforced actual rules and expectations. She needed to contribute to household expenses, respect their privacy, and actively seek employment. The process was rocky, with multiple dramatic exits and returns. But by summer, something had shifted. Stephanie had enrolled in community college courses and found part-time work at a florist shop. Small steps, but in the right direction. My parents underwent their own transformation. Initially devastated by the public family conflict, They eventually sought counseling to address their enabling patterns. We thought we were helping her, Mom admitted during one of our coffee meetups, but we were really just stunting her growth. Dad, less verbal but equally reflective, nodded in agreement. The most profound healing came through my grandmother Ruth, who began meeting regularly with both Kayla and me. At 83, she became an unexpected mentor, sharing wisdom gleaned from surviving her own abusive marriage and rebuilding her life. "The hardest part isn't leaving," she told Kayla one evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "It's believing you deserve better. That lesson takes the longest to learn." Her openness about her experiences created a bridge between generations and provided Kayla with living proof that complete healing was possible. The ripple effects of my stand extended throughout the family. Cousin Jessica confided that watching me hold my ground had inspired her to end a toxic friendship that had been draining her for years. Uncle Frank, initially one of my harshest critics, approached me at a family gathering to apologize more formally. "You showed real courage," he acknowledged, "something I haven't always had myself." Even Aunt Helen, who had spread rumors about my mental health, eventually came around. Her form of apology was less direct, a cookbook delivered to my door with a note. "For your new home, family recipes worth passing down." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. A surprising support network formed around Kayla within the family. Once her situation became known, with her permission, several relatives stepped up to help in practical ways. Cousin Brandon offered legal advice regarding her divorce proceedings. Jessica took the children for occasional outings to give Kayla personal time. Even my parents tentatively offered assistance, careful to respect boundaries but genuine in their concern. My own career flourished once the family drama subsided. With more emotional energy available, I applied for and received a promotion to lead teacher, with a modest salary increase that helped offset the shared household expenses. The recognition of my professional abilities further validated the personal growth I had achieved. Stephanie and I maintained minimal contact, but what interactions we did have showed subtle changes. At a family birthday celebration in June, carefully planned at a restaurant to maintain neutral territory, she approached me during dessert. "I've been thinking," she began awkwardly, "about what happened at Christmas and after. I didn't handle things well." It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Stephanie, it was unprecedented. "No," I agreed simply, "you didn't." "Anyway," she continued, "I'm doing better now. Taking classes, working. Mom and Dad are making me pay rent, which is totally unfair, but whatever." I suppressed a smile at the familiar complaint wrapped in her attempt at maturity. "That's good to hear. So I thought maybe someday, when things are less weird, we could try to, I don't know, do sister things again. Maybe." It was halting and imperfect, but it was also the first time in our adult lives that Stephanie had approached me without wanting something tangible from me. I nodded cautiously. "Maybe someday. We'll see." By July, Kayla had saved enough for the security deposit on her own apartment. We had a bittersweet conversation about her plans to move out in the fall. "You've given us so much more than a place to stay," she told me, eyes brimming with tears. "You gave us time to heal, to figure out who we are without fear. I can never repay that." "You don't have to," I assured her. "That's what real family does. Not because they have to, but because they want to." The most meaningful celebration came at Christmas, almost exactly 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything. I hosted dinner in my apartment, inviting selected family members who had shown genuine support throughout the year. Kayla and the children, now settled in their own place, but still regular visitors, joined us. The gathering was smaller than traditional family holidays, but infinitely warmer. Grandmother Ruth presided from the most comfortable chair, dispensing wisdom and dessert with equal generosity. The children played contentedly with new toys. Conversation flowed naturally, without the undercurrent of tension that had characterized family gatherings for as long as I could remember. As we cleared dishes together, Mom touched my arm gently. "I'm proud of you, Madison, not just for helping Kayla, but for helping all of us see ourselves more clearly. Even Stephanie, especially Stephanie, I agreed. She needed boundaries more than anyone. Later, after guests had departed and the dishwasher hummed quietly in the kitchen, I stood on my balcony, reflecting on the extraordinary year. The apartment around me, my space, my sanctuary, my domain, represented so much more than a real estate investment. It was the physical manifestation of my growth, the place where I had finally learned to trust my own judgment above others' demands. The Christmas confrontation had been painful but necessary, not just for me, but for everyone involved. By refusing to play my assigned role in the family drama, I had inadvertently freed others to step out of theirs as well. My no to Stephanie had ultimately been a yes to healthier relationships all around. If you followed my story to the end, I'd love to know if you've ever had to make a difficult stand against family pressure that ended up changing relationships for the better. Leave a comment below sharing your experience or any questions you might have. Family dynamics can be so complicated, and sometimes the hardest thing is standing firm when everyone expects you to give in. If my story helped you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family stories. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember, sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and everyone else involved.